So yes, so this session is how to measure well-being and productivity using Viva Insights. So let me, so a quick word about me. So my name's Alan Eardley. So I have recently joined Microsoft as a modern work technical architect, working in the technology center. I'm also the hat of grey hat beards. I run the Microsoft 365 security and compliance user group and the London Power Platform user group. So let's jump straight into what the problem is. I think we're probably all pretty familiar now that actually ways of working have changed. You know, as employees, we work differently now. You know, as managers, we need to work differently now. We need to have different ways of actually, you know, engaging with our staff and making sure that our staff are actually, you know, they feel like they're being supported and looked after, and that's really important now. So as we expect more people to actually carry on working from home and have more of a hybrid way of working, we really need to start making some of these changes more permanent rather than just being a reaction to the situations that we found ourselves in. And a lot of the things that we actually look at these days are about, you know, how we can identify people. You know, 59% of employees express concern about burnout. How can we identify those employees? How can we identify when, you know, people are suffering maybe a decrease in their mental health? You know, how can we see whether they are being supported to try and alleviate some of these risks? And that's really what we're going to talk about today is, you know, how we can actually use data to actually try and measure some of these things. You know, our business depends on people. You know, all of our businesses, we have individuals, so we all work, you know, individually, we all work within teams, and we all have external stakeholders, and we need to be able to identify when people are maybe as individuals working more than they should do, where teams are collaborating and working together, and how our organization actually engages with external stakeholders. And when we start to see that, we start to see how resilient our organization is as a set of people working together with collective aims and objectives. So we really want to be able to identify these different types of engagement and these different types of ways that our people actually work together. Now, we're all using Office 365, and one of the key things that we have in backing up Office 365, Microsoft 365, is the graph. And the graph gives us a massive amount of data, a massive amount of information that we can actually use. And if we think about what that information is, it talks about, you know, when we actually engage with technology using different products, when we engage with content, when we engage with each other, you know, when do we actually speak with each other? When do we actually have meetings? You know, we've got so much information that we can actually use, and we can distill that information down and see how it can actually tell us what our behavior is. I think this is really important to understand that actually all of this information, it gives Microsoft a massive amount of data to actually be able to compare and contrast how different organizations are working and what the overall patterns are of how we as individuals work, we as members of teams work, and we as members of organizations work. So really the underpinning of a lot of what we're talking about with Viva Insights is the Microsoft graph. That gives us the data that provides the information, the raw information that we can then use to work out how we need to make changes to how we work and our behaviors so that we can actually be better off as individuals, teams, and organizations. So really the question that we want to ask here is, you know, how are our staff? You know, are they productive? Are they burning out? Are they well? You know, we don't get to see people so often now, so we're not seeing them in person. You know, you can't just kind of stop by a water cooler or a coffee shop and just say, oh, hey, how are you doing? It's much harder to do that now because we're all online all the time, and we can still do that. We can still reach out, but we do need to understand a little bit more about how we interact and what makes our interactions more supportive, and how we can help our staff to make sure that they are being productive, that they are not burning out, and that they are well, and that they are, happy in what they're doing. So the solution that we really have is workplace analytics. To put it in its basic form, all of this information is in the background, and this is now Viva Insights, and what we'll see is as I go through and show you what this looks like, my analytics is still there, productivity is kind of still there, and workplace analytics is still there. They still have their places, but they are converging and they are coming together as Viva Insights. And that means that they're going to be more visible, they're going to be more prominent for all of us. But these different products and the data that they produce are really targeted at different areas. So my analytics, you may have received my analytics emails, you may be aware of the app that's in Microsoft 365 that allows you to really understand how you work and how you interact with the organization. And it helps you to be personally more productive and to really focus on making the time that you have available to you more productive. We then have productivity score, which is kind of an overall organizational score. It provides insights, but that's really getting consumed into the workplace analytics piece, which is the much bigger analytical piece around, can we compare and contrast behavior and see, when we cross-reference that information with maybe HR data, we can see different teams that are being productive, and therefore we can actually take our data coming from the graph, we can take our HR data, and we can really start to manipulate that to see exactly where behavior is shaping how productive and how well our staff are. So these are kind of the core tools that we're using here. And when we think about it, we're talking about behavioral data here. So we're really talking about, the information that exists in our organization and how it can be mapped against, how we work. So, we have some absolute data. This might be coming from our HR systems. We have some information about, what we know. And this is really quite subjective. I have a role, I have a level, but I have information about, I should be able to do this, this, and this because of my role and because of my level. Again, this tends to come from an HR system to say, this is my role, this is my job description. But then we have slightly more objective information. What learning have I done? What do I need to do? Certifications, courses. So we get information where, we might be setting out, actually, to do that role, you need to have these courses. You need to complete these, certifications. We're all probably trying to stay on top of the constant changing of Microsoft 365. So, in order to do that, we have lots of information that we need to accumulate, and objectives really kind of sit in that space to say, actually, to do your job, you need to know this information. We then get more subjective feedback. So, 360 feedback. What do I do? How do I feel? Where do I actually sit in the organization? And this could be, quarterly reviews. It could be annual reviews. It tends to be that more formal feedback on your departments, your manager, you getting that information. And that's a really good indicator of, are you performing? Are you performing well or not? And then we get the how do I feel? The really subjective, well, on this day at this time, I felt particularly good. But actually on another day, I didn't feel so good because I was just feeling the pressure of all the meetings that I was having, for example. And these pulse surveys, as they tend to be called, really give an organization an insight into, the well-being, the mental state of the staff. And, they tend to be anonymized to a certain extent to say different departments maybe feel different ways, they feel supported. And so we get all of this information. And these are all kind of standard sources of information that we get from these different sources. But the thing that we're adding in here is workplace analytics. It's what are we actually doing? where does our information sit in terms of how we are interacting with each other and with the tools. And so we have lots of behavioral data which we can then start to pull together and start to really analyze and think about, particular questions that we want to answer. So the types of questions that we really want to think about here, the face value information, our collaboration habits, how much do I speak to my manager? Is that enough? How much do I have meetings? How much time am I spending in meetings compared with, the total amount of time that I have set up as working hours? How much time am I spending doing email? Am I doing email out of hours? Am I having meetings out of hours? These are things that, we have data that's from the graph that says, actually, we can identify where different people are having those different meetings, how they're interacting, how they're engaging, how much they're actually spending time doing what. And that gives us raw data, but then we can start to take that and really sort of elevate it a bit and start to compare and say, actually, if we take that literal data, but we then layer on top of that the more subjective information about, well, how well is a team performing? That might be coming from HR, that might be coming from dynamics, but we can start to say, actually, we can identify that team A and team B, maybe they both need to do the same thing, but team A might be actually being measured as doing it better than team B. So in that case, can we take the behaviors, that literal data, and say, actually, we can see behaviors of team A are different to behaviors of team B, and therefore try to extrapolate out what good looks like in terms of there are better ways of working, there are better practices that people can use in terms of their behavior, and change that behavior. So this is really where we're starting to layer on top of that raw data some more contextual information to actually give us that information to answer particular questions, to identify how we can make sure that people are engaging more effectively in the organization. And then we can look at, that really contextual information. Can we see that actually, we can see that a team is maybe working a lot more hours than they should do, so therefore they need to maybe have more people added to the team. Maybe there is a process that is taking a long time, and we can actually try and decipher why it's taken a long time, because we have this information about behavior, and we can take that behavioral information and we can really actually start to build on what it actually means and how it relates to how our organization is performing. So there are different layers that we need to think about in terms of this information, and this information, it is very sensitive, so we do need to take that into account as well. Now, and I will cover that later on in terms of the sensitivity of this information, because I'm talking a lot about this literal data, but it is very much secured, so we will cover that. Digital exhaust. So what is this behavioral data that we're actually taking out of the graph? So one of the things that we have is this concept that actually everything that we do is in Microsoft 365. We're actually creating signals, we're creating noise, digital exhaust. There is a measure of everything that we do. So if we take this and break this down, part of what we do, we can set our working times. So, we can do this in Outlook, we can do this in My Analytics, we can now do this in Viva Insights as well. And we can define, the hours that we are supposed to be working. And I do say supposed to be because, many of us do more than those hours. So if we define those hours, that's great. We have a benchmark there to actually say that's when we expect employees to be working. We can therefore decide that actually things outside of those hours are classified as after hours activity. So whether it's before or after. We can then start to measure actually when are people engaging, so whether that's meetings that are in our calendars, and that those meetings, they are measured as being with at least one other attendee. So if you just put time in for yourself, that doesn't get taken into account here. But also we can measure, well, when are emails being sent and received? When are we having Teams chats? When are we having Teams calls? We can measure all of this information, and we can therefore start to see that actually, start to finish, we're starting to work out exactly how many hours people are actually engaging. Now, that's not to say that, our working habits have evolved over time. So we are now definitely looking at more diverse patterns of work where actually it might be fine for me to start work at 6 a.m. because I'm going to have a 3-hour break in the middle of the day, and then I'm going to do a bit of work later on. That's acceptable. But this is really trying to work out, if we just use this raw data, how many hours are we spending? And then we can work out, how fragmented that time is as well. If you've looked at any of the My Analytics recommendations, they talk about focus time. They talk about trying to make sure that you have blocks of time where you can really concentrate on getting work done. Spending a day in meetings is not exactly productive when you know that you're going to have to follow up from that and actually do something as a result. So really thinking about how we put aside the time to have a period of time that you can focus, that you can concentrate, that you can really get work done. This is important as well. So we really need to think about all of these things as being the data that we can get from this digital exhaust. And when we start to then break this down, we start to get interesting statistics. Number of hours of collaboration, 21 hours, average weekly work span. We can start to really measure this and to say, actually, if I know that somebody is in a team and they need to be spending, 50% of their time actually working on coding, writing documents, writing proposals, then I can start to then say, well, actually, they're spending more time doing different things, doing lots of meetings. So therefore, their behaviors are not necessarily as productive as we want them to be because they have too many meetings. So they may be overworked. They may be, there may be a risk of burnout at that point. So working through all of this, this is the data that allows us to answer particular questions and to identify these behaviors so that we can actually start to change them. And because we can measure this, we can identify those changes, and then we can actually implement changes, and then we can come back and measure it again and see, have we improved? So we do have several different data sources that we're using here. So we do have Office 365. So this is the digital exhaust, how we're actually using the tools and the technology. But then we do have organizational data. So, I've worked with clients long enough to know that if I go into them and I say, is your Active Directory up to date? Does it reflect your organization? Most of them are going to kind of go, yeah, no, maybe not. And this is where Workplace Analytics is really looking at this organizational data as a separate input. I want my organization to be able to be structured in a way that actually is going to make sense, not necessarily from an Active Directory perspective, but from an organizational data perspective to say, how do I group different teams together? How do I make sure I've got the levels of anonymity in place? And how do I make sure that I've got an ability to actually measure my organization the way I want to measure it? So that organizational data is a key component that needs to feed in so that the Office 365 data can be contextualized appropriately to your organizational structure. And then we can bring CRM data in as well. So we can bring that data in to actually measure our engagements with our external stakeholders as well. So we have 3 different data sources here that all get put in to Workplace Analytics that allows us to then analyze that data as a single data set. So when we have all of this data, we know kind of what we're measuring, we know the raw components. We then need to think about, what are we trying to do with this data? It's great having lots of data and turning it into information, but we need to think about the purpose of it. And what we really start to think about here is, respond, recover, and reimagine. We are responding to our behaviors at the moment. Can we identify them? Can we actually work out where the the holes are, where the bad practice is. So we need to respond to that. Recovering is saying, well, actually, we know what we've got. Now, what do we actually do to change it? What do we do to improve it? The immediate challenge that we've got, how do we actually recover from that? And then we need to reimagine, in 3 years' time, how are we going to be working? How do we start to prepare our new ways of working to accommodate what essentially we expect to be hybrid? Many organizations are starting to really think now about, do we all go back into the office or do we all stay remote? And this is where we're starting to reimagine, what is working life going to look like? How do we actually engage as a team? How do different types of team engage? Are they all going to be in the office? Are they all going to be remote? How do we measure this? And when we look at this, we're looking at their well-being. We want to be able to respond to areas where we think maybe teams or departments aren't supporting their employees, or the employees are getting burnt out. So we want to enable, measures to say, actually, as a line manager, you need to be supporting your team more effectively. As an employee, you should be highlighting if you're not getting the support, if you've got too many meetings, if you've got too much work and you're spending too long working. We need to be able to measure that, respond to it, and then make sure that actually in the future we reimagine the way people work so they don't get back into that state. And then as teams and organizations, operational effectiveness, improving agility and innovation. Innovation is a massive challenge, isn't it? I mean, the way that we engage as individuals when we're in the same office is one thing, but it's very much harder to do that when we're all online. So we really need to think about how this information can be used to foster what we need in our organizations to make sure that we are as effective as we need to be. So let's have a little look at what we actually have. So I need to find the right screen. So that should be that one. So starting with My Analytics. So My Analytics really is a personal view, and you can get to My Analytics from Office 365. Your organization will need to have enabled it. So if it's not there, your organization will need to enable it. And this is very much a personal view of my world. Now, this is an environment that is not a work environment for me, so it's a little skewed, but it does show me patterns for the last 4 weeks. It will take time to actually recognize your patterns to see how you actually work, but it's split into 4 sections. So focus, it will tell you how much time you have to focus. And this is really where we're, as I said, trying to make time to actually get work done. So if I come in here, I can see that I've got, automatically reserved time. I can do things like that. What is focus time? It's got lots of information about how much time I have to focus, but all the way through My Analytics, it has suggestions. The time you have to focus has been stable around 91%, so that's good. But it will give me suggestions, about what I should be doing. And it says your calendar is usually less than 30% booked. If this was my work calendar, it would usually be the other way around. And it will give you suggestions as to how to manage your time and manage expectations of your peers as well, to actually allow you to have more time, to make more time for you to get work done. So focusing is really about making the time to get work done. Well-being is really about how we, try to not burn out. How do we have quiet days, for example, days when we're not actually checking email, not actually checking, putting ourselves into a relaxation mode, resting, and 4-week trend. Weekends are included because they are opportunities to recharge. So we can configure weekends. We can configure in the config settings what days we're working. And if I go to weekends, I can configure show work week as. So I've turned weekends off. And I was talking about how we measure what days we're available, what time we're available. This is us setting our work week. We can also do things like delay delivery. So only receive emails when you are actually during the your co-workers configured working hours, you're aligning this to your co-workers so they only receive emails at the right time. We can configure focus plans in here as well. And so this is, you know, if I do get started here, it'll say how much time do I want to book? 2 hours a day. Okay. If I go through next, when am I most productive? This is personal. This is really down to you as an individual. So morning, if I do next, mute notifications. Yes, I want to mute notifications. I don't want to be disturbed when I'm in focus time. And off it'll go. And it will try and then schedule in focus time for me, and it will book it into my calendar. So it's, you know, it's saying, okay, it's found some time this week. It's scheduled some times, and then over the next 2 weeks, it's got 7 out of 10 days booked. And that's my working days. So, you know, it's trying to actually help us get the time booked in. If I look at networking, it will talk to who I'm working with and tell me, you know, who I'm collaborating with. And if I've got meetings, it will let me know, you know, who I'm going to be meeting with, etc. And then collaboration, you know, what does my work look like? What do I actually use? Added Teams or, you know, added Skype or Teams link. So what do my meetings look like? Overlap with meetings during working hours. You know, you can see that I've got, you know, a variety of different types of meeting, and it will give me insight into when I'm actually using things as well. So it will give me a lot of information about my personal way of working, and it will give me all of these suggestions as well. Really important to have all of this. Now, if I come through to Microsoft Teams, so you have insights here. So if you're not familiar with how you add apps in, if I put in insights, so if I put Viva, ironically I put Viva, but it comes up with insights, it will be probably renamed. That comes in, and what this does is that gives me some of the information that I'm looking at in my analytics. This is where all of the work is going on at the moment to get more information in here. So I can actually, you know, put in a reminder to build a habit of emotional awareness. How good am I doing? So I can actually set that as a reminder, and then I can come in and I can see a history of when I've actually set this. So I can come in and I can say, how am I feeling? Now that might be useful for you to see, you know, how you're feeling during the day, how you're feeling over a week, over a month. You can actually see and measure how you're feeling. What I also have in here is take a break. Breaks are really important. WorkLab has a whole lot of information on breaks. I'll give you a link to that in a while. But basically, this gives me some deep breathing exercises, which might seem a little elementary, but actually it's really useful. If you actually try it, you're stressed and you go through this actually works really nicely. Now this will also give me, if I've got pinned contacts, it will give me recommendations of tasks. So where I've said I'm going to do something in an email, it will actually put this in here as a task and say, actually, you need to do this. Or is it done? Is it not a task? So it gives you a quick place for you to reference what you need to get done. And then we've got protect time as well. And protect time, again, this is the focus time. So I can actually come in here and I can say, yeah, I've got all of this time. Do I want to book it? I can book time in here. So I've got another way just to actively look for time. I can look through it all the time, and you can see those times when it was booked in from my analytics, it's already got all of those slots booked in. So I can see that, and that's all there. Now, the other thing that a lot of people have been talking about is the virtual commute, and that's where wrap up and mindfully disconnect. So if I set this, that will basically set a reminder to me that will come through in Teams to do my virtual commute, to wind up at the end of the day. So if I do start now, this basically goes through and it says, okay, do I have any tasks? So if you're using Microsoft To Do, the tasks will come up in here. Is there anything I need to do for tomorrow? Yes, I need to do something. So I can make a note. Now this is really important from a well-being perspective because it gives me a prompt to say, yes, I've got a task to do for tomorrow. I then don't have to worry about it tonight. If I do next, it will go through and it will say, okay, these are all the things that you have for tomorrow, and it will allow you to prepare and understand what you're doing tomorrow. Again, it means that you're just you're prepared for what's coming. Again, it's got the reflections. How am I doing? Yeah, I'm great. And then it does the deep breathing again. So it's basically just trying to help us wind up at the end of the day. And this is very much, an individual process. We can choose to do this. Really worth looking at it and trying to get it into your daily habit. So Viva Insights is really the personal place. This is where everything is coming together in teams to see this information. Now I need to flip over to another interface. So workplace analytics. This is an additional level, and workplace analytics basically has lots of information in here. This is very highly controlled in terms of who has access to it. So most people won't have access to this. But what this does is this gives us that information, and it says, actually, let's take employee engagement. It will tell me how many people are involved in this. So team members that are being involved, managers, large teams, levels. This is the breakdown of the organizational data. And it will tell me, 67% of employees have less than 15 minutes of one-to-one time with their managers each week. Interesting stat, it will tell me how it's calculated, and it will provide links to supporting evidence to say why this is important. So this has a massive amount of information on what our behavior actually looks like. And these are, very much standard questions that people are asking. So this interface gives us that standard information. But for all of these, we can come in and we can see how to improve it. What are the insights that we can actually do? Why is this important? What can we do to change this? And then we can explore stats as well. So we can actually click in and we can see more information about, how this breaks down. And, there are lots of different sets of information in here that we can see. Lots of graphs, lots of information. This is really the business intelligence of behavior within your organization. All of this is accessible through Power BI as well. So a lot of these, I need to find the one that has the Power BI, but all of these have access to the information, and you can drill into these. There are also queries, business process analysis, peer analysis. So there's lots of other things that we can do in here. And we can also set some of those plans. So these are focus plans, collaboration, well-being. These are what go into my analytics. So we can set up plans in here to actually give particular advice, and we can target these to particular people, particular groups as well. When we're looking at this, so this comes back, it's got it download PowerPoint. So I'm just going to bring this over because the download PowerPoint is the quickest and easiest way to get all of this information downloaded so that you can benchmark where you are. And you can see that this is basically all of that front page coming down and showing us all of the stats, all of the information. And this is the starting point. Actually, when you want to respond, you need to know what you're responding to. This is where you see all of that simple information that you can take to a leadership team and go, this is how our organization is performing at the moment. All of these categories here, these are really our organizational data, how we're dividing up our organization to make sure that we are giving information back the way we need to see it. And again, we've got see in web page, and we've got information for supporting evidence. All of this is built into this PowerPoint. So it's a really useful tool to be able to see all of the information that we need. And as I say, with the Power BI as well and the queries, we have lots of queries in here that we can use. So we've got pre-selected filters and metrics. There's lots of information that we can actually just pull these out. So if I come into meetings, for example, I come in here, I can see, last 3 months, or the last year. I can set up a range. I can add exclusions. So if there are exclusion groups and people we don't want to include, CEOs, senior leadership team, then we might do that. We can then say, well, what are we actually interested in? Let's say attendees with conflicting meetings, and we can then run that, and that will go off. And that'll go off, run that, and that will actually set up a query, and then we'll be able to see that information when that's been processed. So whilst that's running, there's another one here. So let's actually have a look at that and look at the visualization. And that will come through. Takes up to a minute. As you see, it's analyzing a lot of data in here, but essentially that means that we can put custom queries together as well as using Power BI to access this information. Right, I'm very conscious of time now, so I'm going to come back to the slides. As I say, Viva Insights, what's coming? There's a lot of that My Analytics, a lot of managerial insights as well coming through. If you are a manager, you'll see more information coming through. But it is converging on that Viva Insights within Teams. That app is coming, and it is where all of that information is being developed. So lots of exciting information coming through to make us more effective within our organizations. Now, there are some real world considerations for this. So licensing, you do need a minimum number of Exchange licenses, and that is because we need the anonymity. And the anonymity in workplace analytics is really to say you cannot identify an individual. It is done at team level. It is done through that organizational data to group different teams together. So you can't see individuals. The individual users are allocated a license, so there is a cost. It is a relatively small cost. At the moment it's through EA, but it will be coming through CSP, and basically you'll be able to just buy it off the shelf as well, but you do need that minimum number of licenses. So we also have thinking about who's included in this. So people who have licenses are included, and they're included as primary information as a measured employee, and then we have other information about others as collaborators, so that we can see how those measured employees are actually collaborating with other people within the organization. So there is a lot of information around the security and the privacy for this. It only stores 13 months of data. Only licensed data will be used in terms of the measured users. The minimum group sizes exist to ensure anonymity. So it really is making sure that this is not the ability for an organization to snoop on what people are doing, or to use it as an individual, targeting an individual. It is designed with anonymity and privacy first. There are security roles specifically for accessing the data. So as I say, global administrators won't be able to access this out of the box. It really takes quite a lot to set up to make sure that people have the right access as an analyst to the data. And the content can be published via Power BI. So there is access via Power BI. And that does mean that you can create your own custom dashboards, your own custom insights into this information as well. So in summary, workplace analytics is combining all of those data sources in the digital exhaust. So your organizational data to structure that information, the digital exhaust from the graph, which is the raw data, and then it is contextualizing that so that we can make comparisons of behavior and measure those against more subjective information, like how well a team is performing, to actually see that information. But we can also bring in surveys, those pulse surveys. We can bring that into the data so that we can measure well-being versus behavior and actually really start to identify changes in behavior that we need to actually implement. And then, we really do need to be thinking, how do we measure the current well-being? How do we measure the current health and productivity of our staff. And then how do we improve that? How do we, if we can identify areas that need focus, then how do we actually make sure that we start to improve that? And then really, thinking about changing the way that we work. How do we reimagine our organization, our behavior for the next 3 months, 6 months, 3 years, and really start to plan how we can make sure that we are ensuring everybody in our organization is as productive and as happy as they can be. So next steps really, enable my analytics, add the Viva Insights app to the teams, and then invest in workplace analytics to really get that in-depth data that we can actually use to analyze in more detail how our organization is performing. So really Viva Insights is where all of this is focused, and we really need to be embracing Viva Insights as an individual into our daily life, that virtual commute, booking focus time, understanding, what we're doing that's healthy, what we're doing that's productive, and then trying to make changes. But then we need to do that as an organization and as a team as well, and really make sure that we are trying to engage with our peers effectively. This has been a big thing for Microsoft, and there are some fantastic resources that Microsoft have. So if you haven't been to the Work Lab, visit the Work Lab. There is amazing information there around how to make our organizations work better, more effectively. All of the rationale behind Viva Insights, workplace analytics, it is all coming from science. There's a lot of information in the Work Lab to justify it, but then also Workplace Insights also has all of the information, and this is where all of the source information, the rationale is stored as well. And then Microsoft Docs also has an awful lot of information around workplace analytics, and in particular the privacy and security of it, and how that should be achieved, how it can be handled. And certainly if you need support, then there is a lot of support out there with regards to how that security and compliance works to support the privacy of individuals. And so with that, are there any questions? Let me flip over to the meeting chat and see. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Alan, for the session. It was really inspiring. So far, we do not have questions. If you want, I can unlock the microphone, and we still have 7 minutes, something like this. So if anyone has a question, just feel free.
Yeah, by all means. I mean, if there are any questions, yeah, unmute yourself and ask the question. What happened to the long hair? Yes, Ben, that went a long time ago, actually.
Even with the lockdown, you could.
I went against the lockdown for my well-being and cut the hair rather than growing the hair, just to be different. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Twitter, quite active on Twitter and LinkedIn. And if you do have any questions about this subject, I'm more than happy to answer questions. So yeah, if you do think of any questions, feel free to let me know. And then please, feedback is always welcome. Anything that you think I can improve, then please let me know, because it's always good to get your feedback and to know what you thought of the session.
Yeah, completely. Maybe I have a little question for you, just to know if you have any advice on the kind of people that would be given the security role, the analyst of the data. Do you have any advice, like HR people or only IT people or anything else?
In most cases, it's HR people. So it's HR people and business analysts, business intelligence analysts who are supporting the HR team. But in most cases, what I've seen with organizations is that it is the HR team that are really driving this, because they tend to be the people who understand how to really make those changes and implement those changes from a personal perspective. So there are several roles. There's an analyst role, which gives people access to the information. That tends to just be the HR team that are getting that. It might be senior leadership team. What I've also seen is that people are taking the Power BI and they're publishing that Power BI to a leadership team who are maybe monitoring this, or to a wider team that's usually led by HR.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, I'm here on this this track for the rest of the day. As I say, if you want to reach out on LinkedIn or Twitter, feel free. But if there are no more questions, then I will let you enjoy the rest of the sessions today and enjoy the rest of Teams Nation.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Please take the time, to provide us with the feedback. Chris just put the link on the chat, so yeah, it would be really appreciated.
Thank you.